cocaine is being produced at greater quantities than ever.
Invisibles are the future of the cocaine trade. They don't want a gold-plated Uzi. They don't want to touch a kilo of cocaine. They've realized their best protection is just not being on anyone's radar at all.
As long as there is a stockbroker on Wall Street who's willing to pay $100 to do a bump, there's going to be someone who's going to figure out a way to get it to him.
El narcotráfico tiene demasiados recursos y demasiados medios. Ellos van evolucionando con los años.
Narco trafficking has evolved into a transnational global phenomenon.
Si todo hubiera salido bien, hubiésemos ganado 240 millones de euros.
They felt untouchable. What the DA decided to do was to put in place an operation to get them.
The disadvantage was the sheer scale of it. What the hell is in those bags?
The cocaine industry is constantly evolving.
That's gonna be hard to get on.
It's constantly adapting, it's constantly changing its methods.
$90% de la droga que se produce en el país sale por el mar. Y de ese 90%, el 80% de la droga está saliendo por el Pacífico colombiano.
It leaves the Pacific coast of Colombia and into Central America, and it makes its way into the United States.
What is the real name of the man known as Gerald?
Edison Washington Prado Alava. He is responsible for having shipped into Central America over 250 tons of cocaine. Gerald started by driving semi-submersible speedboats, which would be used to transport cocaine from Colombia to Central America for the rastrojos. The Rastrojos are a criminal gang who rose to power between 2000 and 2010. At their peak, all over the south of the country, this was the organization that monopolized all drug trafficking in southern Colombia. In its time, it came to be Colombia's biggest criminal organization.
So when you say the term fast boats, it's a 30 to 40-foot boat, narrow beamed, and you can put anywhere between 500 kilos to 3 tons on that boat.
Speedboats loaded with cocaine would follow the coast, from Tumaco to Chocó and from there to Panama. Panama was the meeting point for the various drug trafficking organizations.
It's a homemade, almost submarine. It's semi-submersed in the water. The only thing that shows on the top of the water is the top of the boat. Painted like a blue-gray color, which matches with the sea. They're handmade, typically in the jungles along the rivers. They fill them up with cocaine, as much as 8 tons. It's very, very difficult for us to stop them.
We just couldn't work out how a speedboat that was not designed to make it out on the open sea could get all the way to Central America. We started doing field work on the ground. We came across this alias, Gerald. So gradually, through stakeouts, following, phone tapping, we established Gerald had a fake Colombian ID and that he was actually an Ecuadorian drug trafficker. We had to prevent another Pablo Escobar from rising up. The investigation on Gerald started around the end of 2014, early 2015. Most of the Rastrojo leaders had been apprehended, so the gang was decimated. The drug trade monopoly had been broken down into smaller cells, what we called invisible narcos. Gerald's was the cell that was shifting most cocaine into Central America. The first thing was to figure out Gerald's modus operandi. What we did was try to infiltrate by selling them speedboat engines. These had a satellite tracker installed. Gerald's idea was to use very large ships that would carry fuel, food supplies, spare engines, personnel, and mechanics. He placed those ships as strategic points out in this open sea. So these were like refueling points, service stations. With just 2 or 3 stops at these service stations, they would be able to reach their destination, the Central American coast. Over the course of one night, he might send out between 5 and 10 boats, each one of them carrying between 700 and 1,000 kilos. He brought a high level of technical complexity to drug trafficking operations. He would use search buoys, GPS, and that meant shipments never got lost.
Gerald era un típico narcotraficante de la nueva generación, donde entienden que tienen que tratar de mantener un bajo perfil, pero cuyas tentaciones con el dinero no pueden controlar.
His operation center was in Cali. In Cali, he'd pretend to be an important businessman involving cattle rearing, fisheries, and property development. He had a whole facade, and his aim was to blend in with Cali's high society for them to welcome him in. So he had the money to do this, but he didn't really have the way in. That was his challenge, to break into Cali's high society. So we tried to give him, to provide him with the type of woman who would supply this need of his. That was how we selected a woman from our department. A woman who looked like she belonged in high society. And then we sent her to one of Cali's most prestigious gyms that Gerald would visit from time to time. The idea was that she would seduce him. This woman attracted Gerald's attention and eventually they got to know each other. That made Gerald think this could be the opportunity to access Cali's high society through this woman's undercover identity. A woman who could facilitate his access to what he was after. Gerald had been dating her and she asked him to come over. He told her he would and gave her a likely date. The extradition order could only be issued just a few hours before Gerald arrived in Colombia. If he managed to find out that there was an extradition order in the works, he would not return. He'd never come back to Colombia. He checked there was no extradition order, and that's when he accepted the proposition to come back to Colombia and meet with our undercover agent. And that was when the Criminal Investigations Department apprehended him. That was when we captured Gerald. It was 100% successful. We arrested Gerald, his second-in-command, 3 other drug traffickers who were the leaders of his networks. One was Lucho, the head of the production. We captured Tiago, who was in charge of sea routes. We also captured Zorro, who was the networking guy. So we captured Gerald, and from then his whole family. The whole thing crumbled for him.
The vast majority of cocaine that enters the United States enters through ports of entry on container ships.
Only a fraction of the containers on container ships are really closely inspected by the authorities.
These container ships are massive, and they contain hundreds of very large containers. And remember, at $25,000 to $35,000 per kilo of cocaine, a couple of tons hidden amongst the nooks and crannies of a massive container ship represents millions of dollars of proceeds for the narco traffickers. The market now is truly global in nature. Narco traffickers are in fact looking more and more to Europe, to China, and as far away as Australia, because there is less exposure and there is much greater profitability. So, for instance, a kilo of cocaine produced in Colombia may be worth $25,000 when it hits the United States. That same kilo of high-grade cocaine, if it makes it to Europe, is worth from $35,000 to $40,000 US dollars.
There is an evolution in how planes have been used in the traffic of cocaine.
In the 1970s, it was a free-for-all. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of illegal flights into the United States every year. El Chapo, he had probably the biggest fleet of them all. He had hundreds of planes, maybe up to 600, mostly small, junky twin props.
Narco traffickers have more recently begun to use very expensive, very fast Lear-type jets.
Todos estos vuelos eran ilegales y eran secretos. Esta vez, la gran diferencia es que lo hacen desde los grandes aeropuertos, con tripulación legal de lujo, con aviones de más de 70 millones de dólares.
They're often treated differently because it is assumed by security forces that they are owned and operated by ultra-high net worth individuals.
Empezamos a documentarlo a esta nueva modalidad de enviar cargamentos de coca en lujosos narcojets, cargamentos que se contratan en el exterior y que aparecen con itinerarios legales. Estoy segura que en este momento está saliendo un narcojet de Colombia. El invisible es uno de los patrones de San Andresito, es uno de los grandes empresarios y además estaba muy vinculado a esa oficina de sicarios. Es absolutamente invisible.
I'm Ian Truby. I'm a principal officer with the National Crime Agency stationed at Heathrow. In the 10 years I've been in this role, I've never seen an attempt like this. A person using the name Claire Harris made an approach to a broker. They don't have aircraft of their own, but if someone wishes to hire a private jet, they would make all the necessary arrangements for you. Claire Harris requested them a flight from Luton to Bogota in Colombia on the 8th of December, returning from Colombia on the 10th of December, arriving into Farnborough on the 11th of December. The charter was £128,500, and that was paid in cash by Claire Harris and an associate of hers known as Andreas. We haven't positively identified either of those people. It's a hypothesis that the December flight was actually a test run. They were just seeing if this method would work. On the January flight to Bogota, we had Alessandro Aember, the Italian national, Martin Neal, the UK national, and additionally, Victor Franco Lorenzo, the Spanish national, and Jose Miguel Botas, an additional Spanish national.
De lado y lado hay gente a las que les dieron unos roles para que desempeñaran.
Claire Harris explained that the passengers were major players in cryptocurrency and involved in the music industry and were going to meet Bruno Mars while they were in Colombia. It was very brazen. They were using a private jet and they were using Rolls Royces and Mercedes limousines. If they turned up in a 20-year-old car, there might have been some questions asked. They stayed at the Chelsea Harbour Hotel. They had a drink. They put the bags that were eventually taken onto the flight into the locker room in the hotel, and they were seen to change the combination on some of the bags whilst they were in that luggage room. They were picked up in Mercedes limousines and they were transferred to Luton. The 12 suitcases that were booked onto the flight were subject to a security X-ray. Those 12 bags weighed 350 kilos, and we believe that they did contain paper, but we cannot say for sure that it was cash. And they flew from Luton on a privately chartered jet and went directly to Bogota.
Otra de las fichas clave dentro de esta red fue una mujer que trabajaba desde hacía mucho tiempo en la empresa de charter.
We were allowed access to the charter company's CCTV system, which proved very, very beneficial. It identified all of the vehicles. They used 2 armoured vehicles to collect the passengers.
Y se pudo localizar a su dueña, con la que yo hablé antes que la policía. Y ella dio un dato clave. Pudieron reconstruir a través del GPS toda la trayectoria de las camionetas, donde se hospedaron los falsos ejecutivos que venían de Europa.
The bags which were on board the aircraft were taken away by one of the drivers of the armoured vehicles. Those bags did not accompany the passengers to the hotel. Alexander Arias previously worked at Bogota Airport for a number of charter services, so he knew the system inside out. His knowledge of how forward operating bases work and managed was certainly of great benefit to the drug trafficking organisation. He began to organise everything from an apartment which was close to the airport, and this kind of became the centre of operations.
Esta empleada es de nombre Luzdari Espitia y era la que se encargaba de la logística de los vuelos charter internacional. Entonces, si bien era una empleada de nivel medio, tenía mucho poder. Ella fue súper clave dentro de la investigación, ella y su celular.
And she was regularly in contact with Alexander Arias. The following day, the vehicles were then driven to a warehouse in the Fontibon district of Bogota, again, fairly close to the airport. The vehicles were then left for, I think it was about 21 hours, until they were needed again to collect the passengers.
They were due to return to the UK 2 days after they landed in Bogota.
The passengers who arrived in Colombia, they were collected from their hotel, taken to the charter, and boarded the aircraft. The armoured vehicles that were used were allowed to enter into an area which normally they would not be allowed to enter. This was facilitated by Luzdari.
Una de mis fuentes periodísticas me filtró una imagen del video en el que se ve a un supuesto policía antinarcóticos con un perro que estaba revisando las maletas.
They'd gone so far as to put a fake cop and a fake sniffer dog near the aircraft at the time of its departure.
Se logró establecer que este falso policía, en compañía de un policía activo, fueron y compraron todo el uniforme que se requería para fingir ser un policía antinarcóticos.
Farnborough is a small airfield in the southeast of England. It doesn't carry scheduled flights. It's for private jets, executive jets, that type of traffic. The controls around the private jets are different to the commercial airlines.
The controls are far less formal. The narcos are smart, and they saw the opportunity there.
The Border Force officers on this occasion decided that they were going to look in the bags. All he found in that suitcase were blocks of cocaine. The bags literally slide out of the suitcase onto the floor. One of those packages was selected. It's spiked with a knife, a small sample is taken, and that gave an indication straight away for a high-purity cocaine. Obviously, we get cocaine in suitcases very regularly, but never at this amount, 513 kilos. Very, very rarely by this method. That has a street value of £41 million.
They've researched the security protocols, and they were quite happy that they could manage the situation in Colombia to load the cocaine, and then similarly in the UK, they could manage the risk in not being stopped and checked in Farnborough.
Los rostros y las personas que conocemos son de las estructuras más bajas, la base. Pero los grandes dueños de la coca, los grandes lavadores, siguen invisibles. El invisible, en el caso de los narcojet que cayeron en Londres, un importante empresario que sabemos que tiene vínculos con un grupo paramilitar. Sabemos que tiene socios muy poderosos que tienen en Bogotá, pero él posa de empresario legal, puede intimidar fácilmente para que no sea delatado. Las autoridades lo tienen plenamente identificado, saben quién es, pero el pacto de silencio que hay en torno a la salida de la droga ha impedido que los que están capturados testifiquen en su contra.
So the people involved in flying the cocaine back to the UK, despite this being a really brazen attempt to smuggle the cocaine into the UK, I've no doubt they probably thought they were going to get away with it.
They would fit my definition of being a mule. These people were not going to realise the profits from this. They were going to be on some kind of fee, a few thousand, not tens of thousands, certainly not hundreds of thousands.
The Colombian investigation was a very fast-moving, excellent example of international collaboration. In 23 days, the Colombians arrested 6 people. This dog is still wanted.
The cocaine trade is like water. It follows the path of least resistance. And what organized crime likes more than anything else is corruption.
Nowadays, they're shipping cocaine from Colombia across the border into Venezuela, where there are hundreds of illicit airfields.
Because there is no control over Venezuelan airspace, planes can leave Venezuelan airspace utterly unmolested.
They have these incredible maps that just show just line after line, almost all of them coming from Venezuela and then branching off into Central America. It looks like there's about 1 successful flight per day. Over a year, probably 240 tons of cocaine. That number has increased in recent times in Venezuela, where the government appears to be so corrupt, law and order is breaking down.
Efrain Campo Flores is a nephew of the presidential couple in Venezuela, Celia Flores and Nicolas Maduro. He was raised by the First Lady, Celia Flores. Frankie is Efrain's cousin. He's the nephew of the First Lady as well. At the beginning, they were a low-income family, but Celia Flores was the lawyer of Hugo Chavez when he became the president of Venezuela. She is now known for being the First Lady, but before she was the president of the parliament, she had very important charges in the Venezuelan administration. There is a kind of a joke with the Celia Flores family. Flores in Spanish is flowers, so they had their garden of the flowers, so because they were spread all over the system. I think the Flores nephews felt, I'm a Flores, you cannot mess with me because my mom is the First Lady, so they felt untouchable. He told the DEA agent this whole story about the nephews of the president of Venezuela trying to smuggle cocaine into the US. El Sentado wasn't able to record the meeting with an authorized device from the DEA, but he got a picture. What the DEA decided to do was to put in place an operation to get them. The plan was to send what is known as a white plane or a clean plane authorized by the authorities of Venezuela with 800 kilograms of cocaine to the Roatan Island in Honduras. One of the guarantees that the Flores nephews had was the complete access to the main airport of Venezuela. And they were planning to send this shipment from the presidential ramp. That was like their guarantee in front of these drug traffickers.
Quise conocerlo personalmente, ustedes es un placer, hermano. Estamos bastante en Sinaloa, pero nosotros trabajamos independientemente. Yo trabajé en el Venezuela, yo soy de la vieja patria.
Y yo tengo 30 años, yo tengo 30 años, yo tengo trabajando en todo esto, tengo 18 años. Nosotros hemos hecho gracias a Dios, para mí, platita.
The confidential sources of the DA and the Flores nephews, they had 3 meetings in Caracas.
Nosotros estamos hablando eso del aeropuerto principal del país.
Pero nadie puede jugarse eso normalmente porque no tienen lo más sagrado que usted tiene, la salida blanca de un aeropuerto.
They really felt untouchable. They were flashy. A flashy life with luxuries. The confidential source for the DA noticed that Efrain Campo had a huge Rolex, a Rolex Judgemaster 2, valued in $43,000.
Mi reloj, nada, me gusta así porque para mí, un hombre con un buen reloj no puede invertir.
Yeah, I mean, for a watch, it could be the down payment for a house. The second meeting between the nephews and the confidential informants is where they discussed how the money will be used to finance the campaign for Celia Flores. To regain the seat in the parliament, the National Assembly. The third meeting, Efrain Campo brings the brick of cocaine. And the purpose of that was to assess the quality of the material.
Tiene muy bonito color. Y con esto la gente se entiende que es pura aceite.
The confidential source stated that the cocaine was between 95 and 97% pure, and the Flores nephews were sort of proud of the quality of the product. The meeting in Haiti was set up by the DA. The nephews were thinking that they were heading to Haiti to get a big suitcase with $10 million on it, just as a down payment for the first shipment. The DA chose Haiti because Haiti was open to cooperate with the DA. They could just transfer the custody from the local police to the DA directly without passing for the Venezuelan authorities. The nephews arrived to Haiti about 10 a.m. in the morning. They were picked up by this DA informant. They went to the hotel where they had a meeting for about an hour.
En Vancouver, 55,000. Y en Ottawa, 80,000. ¿Se imagina?
They started to discuss the last minute details. After that, the confidential source left the table to pick up the money. Then he sent the signal to the DA agent. And 4 minutes later, they were detained on the restaurant of the Servotel Hotel. Once they were arrested, and after the DA gained custody, they landed in New York that night, and by midnight, they were already in the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan. Usually, El Sentado was surrounded by bodyguards. But the day of his murder, he was left alone. The connection between the murder of El Sentado and the Flores nephews case hasn't been denied or confirmed.
They were sentenced to be 18 years in prison without the possibility of parole.
We have a mafia state in Venezuela, utterly corrupted by organized crime. And this isn't just that the cocaine trade from outside corrupted the regime, they corrupted themselves from within. And it has led to a complete loss of faith in the viability of not only that government, but of Venezuela as a place to bring up your children. And so now we've seen anything up to 4 million Venezuelans have fled their homes. It's just another aspect of the damage that systematic organized crime can do.
The Venezuelan government was totally silent. And of course, the authorities never started any investigation.
I think that the fact that two persons that they think that they can do whatever they want just for having a last name says everything about the state of corruption in Venezuela in this moment.
You only need to be invisible if someone's coming for you. In Venezuela today, you don't need to be invisible.
.727 in Mali. It's one of the most audacious. It was tons and tons of cocaine.
Lucho was a genius. Lucho was part of what has become the new generation of how to run drug businesses in Colombia. Previously, there were massive cartels. The more people directly involved, the greater the risk. Lucho decided, I will outsource.
When you see the amount of drugs that Don Lucho moved, absolutely one of the biggest drug traffickers in the last 10 years, hands down. The estimation is close to 1 million kilograms of cocaine.
So one of the things that a good business person, which Lucho certainly was, would do is diversify.
Esa idea siempre surgía por alguien que alguien lo proponía. Alguien hacía una propuesta, alguien venía de la organización y proponía, mira, tengo un avión para transportar droga hasta África y allá tengo quien lo reciba. Pues a partir de ahí se comenzaba a hacer todo el análisis de qué era, dónde estaba el avión, qué capacidad tenía el avión, se revisaba todo. El plan era recibirlo en Mali, descargábamos la droga y la despachábamos vía terrestre para España.
The transatlantic route between South America and West Africa seems to have really become a thing in the 1990s and especially the 2000s.
Whole countries in Western Africa have simply become narco states because of the amount of money involved.
Once the drugs are unloaded in Africa, They're put on trucks, and there are plenty of overland routes that are just completely beyond the governments of the region and beyond the law. And then it looks like the drugs are smuggled, probably in boats, across the Mediterranean into Spain, Italy, and France.
Atravesó desde Mali, entonces era fácil atravesarlo desde Mali a Brasil y de Brasil subirlo a Venezuela. Esa era la idea, subirlo a Venezuela y después que se atravesara nuevamente regreso a Mali. Pero como el avión no tenía la capacidad de vuelo, la autonomía de vuelo desde Venezuela a Mali, nos tocó mandarlo a arreglar a Panamá. En Panamá lo tuvimos en los hangares, eso es lo de la DEA, que lo tuvimos en los hangares enseguida de la DEA arreglándolo. Vimos nuevamente para Venezuela. En Venezuela se cargó de droga y se despachó nuevamente para Mali. Cuando lo aterrizamos en el desierto, se sacó la mercancía, se quemó el avión. La mercancía estaba al resguardo, me tocó guardarla y dejarla en una bodega guardada porque las autoridades francesas, las americanas, las inglesas, detectaron que había aterrizado un avión en Mali y pensaron que ese avión era armas para Al Qaeda. Entonces tocó dejar el cargamento ahí quieto hasta que se calmaran las aguas. O sea que el cargamento de Mali al final terminó perdido.
So what happened to it?
No supimos. Y no alcanzamos a ver qué pasó porque nos detuvieron para esa época precisa. Si todo hubiera salido bien, hubiésemos ganado 240 millones de euros.
The worst phrase that was ever attached to drug trafficking was the war on drugs. Can we win this war? No. Because the war denotes a beginning, an end, a victor, and defeat. It's not something that's ever going to end. It's crime. You fight it constantly from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed.